Well, I better run some tests on it. An explosives test and a biochemical examination. Whoa! Hold it! Spike! No! Spike!
Huh. What the hell is it?
Greetings, children of the screen, your friendly neighborhood nerd scum here once again. Welcome to another edition of Carry That Weight, the Cowboy Bebop retrospective, and I am joined by...
Hey, I'm Vic.
Right on, guys, so this time we were taking a look at session number 18, Speak Like a Child.
Okay, showtime.
I think it's time to blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
Right on, guys, so, session 18, Speak Like a Child. In this session, we open up with the crew on a planet where they get a package that is intended for Faye. However, she's not there because she is off at the racetracks losing all of her money. So, Jet goes ahead and pays for it, but when Faye arrives, she doesn't have any money, so she just takes off. And from that point on, Jet is trying to figure out what to do, and just as he, kind of decides that he's going to return the package, Spike opens it up, revealing it to be a beta tape. So from that point on, the episode becomes them trying to find a way to watch this tape as Faye kind of goes through the cycles of gambling addiction, where she's just oh, I'm winning big and now I'm losing everything. And then eventually she managed to make her way back to the guys because they have to go all the way to Earth to try to find a Betamax player. And when they do, they find out that the tape, in fact, gives her a little bit more insight into who she used to be and where she came from. So, Vic, what'd you think about this episode?
Definitely not as good as the previous episode that we watched.
The Mushroom Samba episode?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not as fun.
Okay, no. Take that back. It's just as good, just not as fun. Because it's more somber and serious and those kind of things. But it still really, really works for an episode. Solid episode. It's amazing. We get to know more about Faye. It's great. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a really, really solid episode. And it's one where we're starting to get closer and closer to the end of the series. And while there's still going to be a couple of fun episodes, they really start in the subtext for all these episodes really pushing forward kind of the themes and the overall, character narrative that's been going on, that's been growing throughout the series, and kind of every villain that we've met, or every villain of the week, every bounty has kind of in some way or another mirrored the crew's kind of own experiences. And in this one, it's not only that there's not really a person they're chasing, there's a tape that they're chasing, and it turns out that the person who occupies that spot this week is Faye. So it's actually one of the first episodes where they take that idea of looking at the reflection of the Bebop crew and actually examine one of the crew themselves. So in that respect, it's very interesting, and it definitely marks a good turning point in terms of the narrative for the overall series. So yeah, it's an episode that, while it's not as fun as some of the previous ones and definitely doesn't have the kind of action, it is really solid and really important to the series as a whole. So, Vic, what was your favorite thing out of Speak Like a Child?
I originally was going to say something along the lines of getting to see more about Faye's past, but I already used that in a different video. So I'm going to say something similar to it in the fact that we got to see both sides of Faye, who she is now as we know her, plus what she used to be as a small innocent girl. She's out there gambling, losing all her money. And then later on, we get to see, she used to be, a cheerleader of some sort. And, what? This isn't the Faye that we know, but this is who she used to be.
Right, and she has no recollection. Even watching the tape, it doesn't bring anything back for her.
Yeah, it just...
And especially because, in the tape, the little girl version of her is saying that, I'm not there now, but I'm here now. and like don't lose me, and it's just like, yeah, like literally you're watching a tape of someone who's dead, like, and kind of like them sending a message from beyond the grave, because while Faye is very much still alive, that person, whoever it was, is dead. It died in the accident that they then had to freeze her for. Like, that person is gone and will never come back. And Faye, as she's watching it, same thing happens like actually with Jet and Spike. Like, you can just see it as they watch the tape, like the realization of like the person she used to be, the fact that she can never get that back, and how much more she actually lost than any of them thought. And that's kind of rough.
It is. It kind of sucks, really.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful like narrative device, and it's a beautiful, especially because like the guys on the ship are so befuddled and like baffled by Faye and how she is and everything about her, and like Jet makes it his mission in this episode to like figure out what's on this tape and find it out and like all this kind of stuff. And like it's really this really nice moment of like, even though he puts the focus on the tape, like clearly he knows that in some way it's related to Faye. So I find it interesting that it definitely feels like one of those things where Jet, not being able to like consciously process his emotions and about the crew and stuff, like has basically like gone on this whole thing because he somewhere subconsciously knows that figuring out what's up with this tape will help him understand her better. But he can't do that, even to the point where like when they're on the mission to find the Betamax player, he like starts, why are we here again? Why are we doing this again? So yeah, like getting to see both sides of Faye and getting to see the journey that is like taken to get there is really awesome. And just like it's the Betamax and like that whole idea of how ancient it is, like I don't know, everything about it really, really works in really great ways. And you get a lot of great stuff out of it, like them going to visit the little shop where the guy has all the old tech, and he's like watching like soap operas, or like not even soap operas, like just
It
like
was
it's like
straight up
sitcom.
anime is what it looked like.
It looked like a. Oh, of course, it's in a cartoon, so it's hard to tell. But I always took it as like one of those Korean like sitcom soap opera things.
Oh my god, it's a K-drama.
Yeah, that's what it kind of felt like. And one about like a brother and sister who might be like hooking up.
That's totally a K-drama.
Yeah, that's what
they even
I
had
felt
the
it
really
was.
bad like dub over
Yeah.
of her like step brother or whatever, twin brother.
Right, but other people have said that it's just supposed to be like a weird offbeat sitcom of some kind, so who knows. But anyway, we don't get any of that without like the exploration of the tape, and like the root of that being getting to see both versions of Faye at one time, which actually leads us very nicely into what my favorite thing about this episode is.
All right, segue.
So, as for my favorite thing about this episode, basically, as I said before, the show basically presents us with a lot of villains of the week who are kind of mirrors of our main characters. And what I mean by that is not so much like what they do as a profession, but the idea that they're all running. And specifically, they're running from their own past. Like, they're characters who are caught in a perpetual state of kind of just circular motion because they cannot deal with something in their past. And so, like, that's something that's evident with all the crew members on BEBOP. And what's interesting is, like, we actually now have been able to see Jet deal with those moments. And in this episode, we actually see through what he does to, like, figure out what's on this tape. And as I said earlier, subconsciously kind of need to understand Faye. We see him moving past his issues, like, that are rooted in his history.
Yeah.
Like, that's an element of him trying to take steps forward into, like, bridging the gap between like his trust in women in general and his idea of like partners and community and family and stuff like that. So we get to see him confront his past and move forward. And then like again, we never get to see that with any of the villains. Just about all of the villains, except for in the episode where Jet deals with his past, this very last one, like where it's his old partner, like that's the only time we see another character confront their past and try to deal with it. But that character, his dealing with it doesn't lead to him moving forward. Mm-hmm. It leads to his death, which becomes very important as the series goes on. But what's interesting is that in this episode, Faye is also given a chance to literally confront her past. and she spends the entirety of the episode at the racetrack, like going through the same cycle of like repeating the same mistakes over and over again, because again, like, and it's what's really so brilliant, the episode starts off with Jet telling a parable about a guy who's looking for treasure, but like Jet fails to miss like the whole point of it. And the point of it is the same thing about the characters. It's like a character who is so hung up on things that he learned in his past, on this treasure that he's seeking, like, and like the glory it could get him, but like it's not related to anything that's prescient, you know? And that's the same thing with these characters. They treasure something from old so much without really understanding it that it paralyzes them and enables them to move forward in any meaningful way. And so it's really interesting. We get to see Jet working through his stuff, unaware of the fact that he's working through it, but we get to see it in action. And then we get to see Faye stuck in the same cycle that the crew members have been stuck in. And then because of Jet, the character who already broke out of that cycle, Faye also gets that opportunity. So as the characters grow and like affect each other, they're giving each other the possibilities to find a new life together, or to find a new life through each other, to find a path to that.
Yeah.
And again, just like having Faye be able to literally confront her past, to be able to look at herself, and even though she doesn't remember it, she knows it. And on one hand, it just like raises so many more questions for her. But on the other hand, it's the first time we've ever seen that character actually try to really confront her past. Like, she tries in the previous episode with her My Funny Valentine to like get answers, but even that is more of like, that's seeing Faye fall into the same patterns that she's fallen into in the past, and that's why she gets nothing from it. Whereas in this episode, it's the first time of her breaking the cycle of like all the bullshit she's been living in, and like giving herself a moment to try to approach this in a different way. And that's kind of my favorite thing, is that like just those themes that run all throughout the series, and like the way that it affects our main characters, are like perfectly balanced and utilized on every level of storytelling in this episode. Like, we get to see all those aspects of it, and it's so important because of where the show is going. And I don't want to spoil where the show is going for those of you who haven't seen it, or for Vic here who's never seen the whole series before. But that whole idea of like finding a way to confront your past and move on in a meaningful way is one of the main themes. I mean, the tagline of the show and what we call this retrospective is carry that weight. And that line is about the idea that like there are some things that happen to you that you will just carry with you. And the show is asking you to like watch these characters who are weighed down by their past and their history and their own bullshit, but it also warns you that when it's over, you're going to carry that weight as well. And this episode is kind of a perfect encapsulation of like all of that and all the characters, and then also like kicks off the next wave of character arcs and growth for the rest of the series. So I know that was very long-winded, like super in-depth, like blah, 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 blah. But that was my favorite thing about this episode. It's fucking awesome.
It was deep and you had a point to it.
Thank you. I try.
Yeah, good job.
I wasn't just bullshitting y'all like I did before with Jet and the lipstick in the previous episode. Like, I actually meant all of this. Now that I'm done being long-winded as a fuck, what didn't work out for you in this episode? Or like, well, you know, what wasn't firing on all cylinders? Because they're doing a lot in this episode, so it only stems to reason that there'd be a few things that don't quite work.
Yeah, there's actually a couple things for me. One of which, like, I understand why they did it, kind of thing. Like, the first thing that I wanted to bitch about is, like, they made it out to be, like, an episode that was going to be dedicated to finding out more about Faye and her past and everything, but all we really get to see is a short video of her. We don't really get to know her name or anything. We just get to see that she was your typical innocent, small child, you know?
Yes.
So, like, I understand why, because, like, they had to have room for the Spike and Jet going to have the whole expedition on getting the tape and everything. So I get it. It's just one of the first things I wanted to bitch about.
Yeah. Well, I will say one thing, though, about that. While on the tape itself doesn't confirm her name, I don't believe. The fact that the tape was able to find her confirms that her name really is Faye Valentine. because the tape would have had to have been sent in her previous life under the name she went by. And because there were no documents of her after the gate crashed, is what they said, which might be a lie in My Funny Valentine. But the fact that the tape finds her, and with things that happen later on, we can confirm that, yeah, Faye Valentine is at least her real name. But I do see what you're saying in terms of, like, for an episode that kind of confronts Faye's past, we don't get a lot of that. And that's fair, totally.
Yeah.
So you said you had something else as well?
Yeah, the second thing I wanted to bitch about was the fucking ending. I don't know exactly what I was expecting or hoping for, but there was no, like, closure.
That's the
It just
point.
ended. We didn't even get to see Spike and Jet's faces after the video ended.
Yeah. And
I'm sure Ed was just kind of like, what? But, you know.
Oh, yeah, and that's totally the point of it,
know,
is just that, like, yeah, and just like you were saying, actually, I mean, it feeds into the same thing of, like, her not getting enough, and it's just, like, she's on that path now, she's able to confront it, but, like, she can't have answers, because that's too easy. Like, it's, you can't fix it in one fell swoop. Like, first off, she has to be presented with something that actually makes her not just, like, oh, you know, I wish I knew who I was, and, like, my life's so hard, but actually, like, start examining it and start thinking about the person she was before and how that might relate to who she is now. Because she's had no frame of reference before, you know, up until this point. So, yeah, like, it doesn't give you any closure, and you don't get very much of it, but it is, like, the catalyst for Faye's change, for her major character arc. And yeah, like, because of that, you can't have a sense of closure, you know? I would also argue that, like, Cowboy Bebop isn't really a show that provides that. Like, they try to mimic real life in a number of ways, and one of them is that, like, while their main story arcs are definitely tied up by the end of the series, there's a lot of, like, emotional things and, like, side stories that you don't get what we would normally consider to be, like, a narrative climax or, like, emotional closure, because that's not true to life. And they wanted the show to feel very stripped down and kind of emotionally real. And I think that because of little moments like that, I think it really succeeds in making the show both fun, but also, like, bittersweet and kind of heartbreaking in places. Anything else to bitch about?
No, that's all the bitching I had. It was a great episode.
It was a great episode.
The tape is messed up.
That isn't helping, Spike.
It's not? Huh.
Right on, children of the screen. So yeah, as we were saying, this is a really great episode. It's a lot of fun, but also has some really, like, heartstring pulling, like, emotional moments. Like, they really managed to balance everything out really nicely and push the character and the overall series plot forward without having to use vicious or anything like that. So yeah, all in all, just another great episode that you definitely don't want to miss out on. So thank you, children of the screen, for joining us for another edition of Carry That Weight, the Cowboy Bebop Retrospective.
Later.
And if you guys like this video, please leave a like and share it with some friends. Also, if you're not subscribed, please hit that little bell so you can get updates on all the dope content we'll have coming out in the future. Furthermore, if you'd like to follow us on Instagram or Twitter, we'll have the links for that in the description below. Once again, thank you, children of the screen. Hope you all have a good one. Nerd Scum, out.
Bye.
The